Oh, you sure you don't want me to move around the spot?
I think it's on the first one, so we'll, he'll call for him when it's time. I have him, he's got on his script up there.
Yeah.
All right, folks, I have 6 o'clock. Everybody's ready to start. I call the December 29th, 2020 Utility Advisory Committee meeting to order. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown? Here. Mr. Dial?
Here.
Mr. Helpenberger? Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Osborne?
Here.
Mr. Pridgeon? I believe he was joining us online. Is he online?
He is.
Mr. Sampson?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Sweat?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mayor Witt?
Here.
And Chairman Green.
Here. All right, we have minutes from July 9th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Before we take a vote on the minutes, I do have some questions. Mr. Sweat, I'm going to direct the questions to you. I recognize that you may not have the answers, but hopefully we have the folks in the room that do. So the minutes that we're about to vote on, the last meeting for the Utility Advisory Committee was July 9th, 2018. And so I just want to get everybody in the room spun up on where we are, to include myself on some of those items. I believe that in those minutes, it talks about the county having the 2017 rural infrastructure grant of $3.2 million. Is that grant closed out? What happened with the rural infrastructure grant for 2017? That was nothing for us. We have no information on that grant.
No, sir. I do not.
Mr. Sweat, if you could follow up with the county and provide that information. Thank you. Also, in those minutes, we talked about a 2018 rural infrastructure grant of $50,000. Same question. I know it's been a while. Any status on the $50,000 rural infrastructure grant?
I think it's probably the same answer.
Now, that one has been closed out. That was the one for the wastewater capacity study from Bell Road to St. Margaret's that the county originally applied for and turned over to us. And that one was originally, it says 50,000, but it was for 200,000, and that one is closed out.
So the amount on that was 200,000,
Yes, sir.
and it is closed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And is that the grant where the county transferred the authorship to the city? Is
Yes.
that grant? And then, of course, we talked about the EDA grant for Bell Road. I think the projection on that at the time, 2 years ago, was 7.7 million. Do we have any update on the Bell Road EDA grant?
That would be through the county, sir.
Mr. Sweat, same if we could reach out to them and just kind of get an update.
Follow up on that.
Thank you, sir. And then did we receive the Florida Jobs Growth Grant for the sewer plant and lift station improvements on the east side of town? I know this has been a while, so some of this information may be real old for the folks in the room. I'm just trying to follow up and get us all on the same page. Did we receive that Florida Jobs Growth Grant?
There again, that one was through the county, and as far as I understand, that's what they're building the east side wastewater treatment plant for, that $10.2 million.
And that's 10.2. I know we expected somewhere between 10 and 15. Mr. Dial, this question probably is more for you. I've seen in the minutes you had advocated for looping the Bell Road system to relieve pressure on the system. Was that the wastewater that we did that on, or was that the
That was the water.
That was the water. And was that completed
It is in the process of being completed now.
It's currently in the process. And you have funding for that, right? The
Yes.
funding is there for that? One of the other things that I noticed also in those minutes was that the county was going to conduct a study of the city wastewater lines. Did that occur?
That was part of that RF grant, or that $200,000. That was from Bell Street all the way to St. Margaret's, and that was that part of that grant.
And so they did conduct that?
Well, they turned it over to us, and Jones Edmonds is the one that actually did the work and the study, the engineering on it. But yes, it has been done.
Thank you, sir. And then my last question, I know there's a lot on these old minutes. It's just been a while. Mr. Kaysen at the time mentioned a 3 to 5 year St. Margaret's reconstruction project. And I know we budgeted some major improvements at St. Margaret's. I'm assuming that's what he was referencing, or where are we with the 3 to 5 year St. Margaret's reconstruction that was mentioned?
Yes, so that, oh,
Let's say I actually have an update on that later on in the meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, so I will give you an update on it
super.
when we talk about.
So those were my questions concerning the minutes. Before we vote, Mr. Sampson, did you have any questions on the old minutes?
I just want to clarify that 200,000, that's the one we talked about, that we didn't get exactly what we thought we were getting.
no, so that was for a GIS study. Well, not a GIS study, but that was for Jones Edmond to come in and locate some of our utility systems and stuff like that. That's totally separate from that
Okay.
grant here.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions about the old minutes? Any of the other committee members have any questions about the old minutes to get us all on the same page? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Same thing, voice vote. All in favor of approving the agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. And then now we're coming to presentations, and I have Mr. Zuber and Mr. Stewart with the update for the 47 Cornerstone Crossing project. Thank you, sir.
My name is Scott Stewart, and I'm the developer of the project called Cornerstone Crossings, which is on Highway 47 and I-75. I just wanted to kind of brief you a little bit about it. I'm sure you probably know some of it, but we're developing 27 acres down there, which will be mainly retail, it'll be gas stations, fast food, some property along interstate, so that all the uses still being figured out. It's for the end users. We started on this several years ago. It's been a long process to go through with, we're going to get work with FEMA and some AT&T easements and have the county vacate an old roadway in there. So we've got a lot of details to kind of get cleared up like that. During that process of doing that, we heard that the city's working on a grant to extend green sewer down close to that area. And so then we work with the county and with the state to get a grant on our end to bring sewer from our property up to potentially connect into your system up there. So we're at that state right now. We'll be signing that. It's a jobs private grant. And we'll be signing that, guaranteeing the jobs. And then through that, we'll be hiring, we'll put an RFP out for engineers to do some work on that. And during that process, I'm sure they'll reach out to the city to make sure we're doing it in compliance with the city, what the city needs, to make sure the capacity is right. We'll be putting a lift station in down at ours because it's downhill at the bottom of it. We'll put a lift station in with the goal of being able to bring it up tight into your system. We have some work to get done on that. We have to get an engineer hired, go through that. We have to get with you folks, make sure we're doing it the right way and the way it fits your systems and things like that. And we know we can't tie into it right away. We have to wait until the process kind of goes through, but we're prepping our way that direction to be able to tie into that system at some point in time. And we've had Greg Bailey and his firm have done some flows for us for our flows. And we'll provide that to whoever the engineer becomes on the project. The county has somebody that will be working that grant. I'm not sure what the right word is, but as soon as it's a grant administrator, maybe they'll be doing that grant, and so they'll be processing that thing for us. And so we have our plans, all the preliminary plans are already done with the county, so our site plan's done, and that's what we're showing here. Is that we have to tie into Highway 47, we have to put a deceleration lane in. We got to get all the grading redone. We have two big retention, offsite retention ponds that's working with Swan River Water Management to get done right. So those are being all calculated. The calculations have been done, and we're getting all processed right now. So I'll be taking a Little Caesar, which is on the corner there right now. I own that building. I'm going to be move that down and dose that building, get rid of that building, because my goal is that the whole project, which wants to look really nice. So I can't picture leaving an old building on a brand new site. So as we've said, that makes sense to move that. So that'll be happening after we get water and sewer down there. We'll build a building. We'll get the Little Caesar set up, and we'll go back and goes over down, and we'll incorporate that some of the project. So we anticipate that sometime about a year and a half from now, maybe you folks should go with your system. We think it's the spring of 22, I think, something like that. So we're kind of using that as our benchmark models to kind of think and work towards that. And during that time, we'll finish our grant with the state. We'll get our engineers, our out for them. We'll get them to design the system. And there, I'm sure they'll be in touch with the normal way. But that's just a quick little update of what we're working on and doing. And we're thrilled that you guys have a grant there for sewer down that area, because that whole section on there has been kind of stalled for a long time because of the sewer. So we really appreciate what we did. I don't know who did the grant, but what we did. Thank you. So, do you have any questions for me?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
right now, you got it laid out now, but you hadn't really got it designed as to how many gas stations or whatever's going in yet. That's still.
We have it, it's broken down to 11 lots. And so on there, we have a letter of intent right now from the National Fast Food Company. And we're incorporating into that letter of intent the language that we need to have from the state to guarantee the jobs. Because it's a jobs grant, so we have to make sure that they'll provide the documentation needed for the state. So we're working that letter of intent right now with the fast food places. We contacted several big grocery stores, and one of them is really interested. I'm coming down there to finish that process. We don't have a letter of intent from them right now. They're not even started on gas stations yet. I think it's a great spot. We have the corner that's right between the stoplight and the interstate is a great site for a gas station, so that will be a gas station. So we've kind of identified what's going to go there, but I don't know who's going to where.
Right.
So if you go across the front of it, on the far right will be a retail center, and then a gas station, and then the big building is designed big enough to hold something like a CVS, although that's not a current tenant. But it's designed big enough to hold something of that size, a little bit of fast food. In the back, we put in potentially a hotel, but we have nothing on that right now. So we're still working on those concepts.
And anything else, Mr. Mayor? Mr. Sampson, do you have any questions?
No.
Mr. Stewart, I have a couple of questions. So you're putting in lift stations
Yes.
on your property as well. And then when you tie into us, I know we're working on lift stations down there as well. Mr. Doc, can you speak to where we are with that on 47? I know we were trying to get easements and.
All the easements have been acquired, the locations are set, and we're looking, which Mr. Sweat's going to address that in a little bit, but we are looking to get 90% plans probably the end of this week, into next week, and then have 100% plans by the end of January. But we have acquired all the easements and everything that we need.
What I've understood from one of the previous meetings there is that your lift station is going to be, I think, on the corner somewhere by Arrowhead and Windswept, somewhere in that area. I own that corner of right there, so if you need some help or any easements or things like that, that probably I can work with you on that too.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that offer. I wanted to ask, I know we've had a lot of discussion about the city's consumptive use permit, your projection for water use for the entire site. What are you projecting for that? Is it
Greg Bailey did that, but I don't know if that is right now. And what I would hope would happen is that the engineer that we get on board does a better job than what I know right now, when I was assumption. So he has that, and that was, what did we do with that, remember? Did it consent to?
Yeah, Jamie Bell with Jones Edmonds, actually, she acknowledged that they had taken those potential flows from the expansion of the area that Scott just presented and the opposite side, eastern side of the interstate, and used those anticipated loads in their system design. And they are currently, those flow rates for sewer are figured into there, and of course, naturally estimating the water flows as well. So she did confirm when she was here in Lake City at the last meeting that those were actually engineered into their design.
She is on the meeting and raising her hand to speak.
Yes, ma'am, we could let her speak.
Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing tonight?
Well,
Good. I just wanted to let y'all know that I'm here and available to answer any questions if you have any. But yes, what has been said so far is correct, that we took the numbers from North Florida Professional Services and we modeled those with our design, and we have sufficient capacity in the lift stations for the across the street flows.
is the wastewater from that area, is that projected to go to St. Margaret's or Kicklighter?
Kicklighter, sir.
That's projected to go to Kicklighter.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Yes, sir. And I'll be here for the rest of the meeting if you need anything.
Mr. Stewart, do you have any numbers on the expected economic impact of the development for the county?
Yeah, and Jim, we remember, we put together a list of projected capital improvements. We think that number is about $10 million for the capital improvements. We think the sales, we have a spread on the retail sales of about 12 million. So we don't really know all the end users, but we did our best guess. So our retail sales was says 5 and 10.
Yes.
And we had, thank you. Okay. And we had one more calculation, which was, wasn't there, we had sales, we had,
Economic impact.
yeah,
So the sales and the capital improvements.
capital improvements was 10 million, sales was 5 to 10. And then, maybe it was real estate, I don't remember that last one, but we were working on getting those information together. We're going to be sending those to the county also, because we may approach the county about trying to see if they can help us any potential sales tax rebates. We're not sure yet on that. Those would not be used for us. We're still working on that detail right now.
From the city perspective, what is the, are there other challenges that you project out with the development of that project that where the city can make it easier for you? And if so, would you identify those?
Sure. We thought that gas would be a kind of a major issue. We'd like to get natural gas to the property. We'd use natural gas that was there right now for Little Caesars, right away propane down there. So we talked to Jamie when she was in town last time. She mentioned to us that we will have natural gas to the end down with a lift station, because you need to have that for a backup if the power goes down. The same thing for us. We need to have natural gas on our site for our lift station. So what we'll probably do is that will be incorporated in the same time we put it in our sewer and water lines. We believe, or the sewer line to your station, we believe the water is located down in there generally. I can't remember. Maybe it was Jamie. Do you remember where the water line's at down in there?
Sorry, I had to wait to be unmuted. Where the water line crosses, it's near the RV park. It actually comes through the Casey Jones RV park.
It's a big line, isn't it? Like a big, what size line was that one?
Paul, do you know what size line it is? Off the top of my head, I don't know the water size.
That's that 20-inch that comes down 242.
To answer your question, I don't know of anything right now that's critical. We need your lift station sewer to come down there, so that's the main thing. So we're thrilled that's happening. And during our engineering study, we'll probably make sure we get tied into the gas line also. So that way we think water, sewer, and gas are all on that side, in that area, or will be at some point in time. Gas will come down, the sewer comes down, so I don't know, we have no big challenges right now except to get it done.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Thank you. And I suspect we're going to talk about the gas line probably further into the meeting tonight. So, anyone else have questions concerning on the committee? Have questions for Mr. Stewart?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
do we have an estimated timeline for the capacity that may be needed, like for the gas, for example? The reason for questioning is we're in the process of designing, there's going to be a 4-inch section from the interstate down to the area where you just discussed. If the capacity at the build out side is going to be big enough, we may want to upgrade that section to go ahead while we're doing it, to only do it one time. That may be something that we need to look at. I see there's a lot of restaurants and stuff in here. That one section could be a bottleneck, which obviously we don't want to do.
Yes.
We don't know the end users right now, but maybe it's more restaurants than we think. We don't really know quite yet. So that would be very helpful to have that taken care of.
Outstanding. And would I'm assuming Ms. Bell would be the individual that would be working on that?
I'll follow up with that,
Okay.
make sure, but that is something we definitely want to look at as we're building out now.
Super. Outstanding. Mr. Stewart, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your help on this too.
All right, that's all I have for presentations. I think the next section of the agenda is persons wishing to address the committee. And so we'll have public comments. Before we do, I'd like to remind everyone that citizens are encouraged to participate in the meetings. We encourage civility and public discourse, of course. Please speak directly to the chair if you wish to speak, and give us your name and address as well. And I know that we do have one submission via email from Mr. Toy. And I think he wants to speak specifically to the ordinance 2174. So I think we'll have Mr. Toy at that time when the ordinance comes up. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak?
There's one person connected by phone. I'll just remind them to press *9 if they want to raise their hand.
So
Other than that, there's nobody online.
So if you're connected by phone, press *9 if you wish to speak. And no other members online?
No.
Anyone from the public in person? All right. So since there are no public comments, we'll move on to the next item. So for old business, we have none. And we'll move on to new business. Give me 1 sec. So new business, we have a City Council Ordinance 2020-2174 up for review. This ordinance was referred to the Utility Advisory Committee via the council on December 21st. It relates 2020-2174 relates to the waiver of impact fees for the development and construction of affordable housing. Is Mr. Toy on Zoom?
He was before the meeting started, but he doesn't appear to be now unless he's the one that is on the phone. And they just raised their hand, so maybe that's him.
Yes, so let's.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Well, I want to start out by thanking all of you for taking the time to do this tonight. I really appreciate that, and it's great to speak with you. Looking at Ordinance 2174, it's I think it's a good sort of start to looking at affordable housing in Lake City, and obviously the Florida Apartment Association, the association I represent, champions this sort of legislation, and we've seen this pop up at the city and county level across the state of Florida. And absolutely encourage the growth of affordable housing. However, looking at the legislation, it seems to be sort of an all or nothing approach. I'm not sure if you received, hopefully you did, we provide some language recommendations as far as potential changes to the ordinance. Because as it stands currently, the language as it's written states that it has to be comprised of 100% affordable housing units to qualify for the waiver. However, in our experience, we've noticed that most developers cannot reasonably forfeit market rate residences in favor of affordable housing units as there's not a favorable return on investment. So our recommendation, at least for the committee to consider, and we would hope that you would encourage the Board of County Commissioners to adopt this, would to be looking at providing partial waivers based on the number of affordable housing units within a residence. Or another way to say that is the percentage of units within a residence equals the percentage of impact fees that are waived. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toy. Mr. Sampson, do you have any questions for Mr. Toy?
I don't have any questions, but I did notice that language seemed to make a lot of sense. I don't know if you had a chance to review it or anyone else did, but.
I did. Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions for Mr. Toy?
Not right now.
Mr. Young, could you speak a little bit to, I think, to the partial waiver? If not all of a development would fit the affordable housing, but if some of the units would.
As of right now, the way we wrote it was to be 100%. In my investigations throughout the state, I found very few jurisdictions that had partial, one being Hillsborough and another one being Miami-Dade.
So those are the only two in the state that have a partial?
Yes.
And I think in our community, just for me, I think when we think of affordable housing, we think typically of single family units. I think maybe a duplex, we don't typically think of large sprawling apartment complexes. And is that correct as well?
No, sir. Most of our affordable housing here in Lake City is apartments.
It is apartments.
Yes, sir.
And so is that something that you would recommend us looking at the partial waiver, or do you think that we need to continue with the 100%?
I would have no qualms with it, with us looking at a partial waiver, being, say, you have a 100-unit apartment complex and 30% of them are affordable, then they would get, those 30 dwelling units would get the waivers, not any of the other 70.
I know for me, one of the things that I think of is, you know, I don't want, you know, because maybe we're not perfect. I don't want to delay. If someone is wanting to develop affordable housing in the city right now, you know, I think we've already delayed this from the city council pushing it to our committee. Would it be possible for us to maybe take a vote tonight on approving it as written with the 100% and maybe coming back at a later date to look at the partial waiver, or would that be administratively not?
No, sir, that would be something that is justifiable. I mean, we could do an amendment to it.
When you say partial, is that the affordable housing units would be waived and the others would pay theirs, or if it was 30%, they would just get a 30% discount off of the top?
Well, I believe the way the impact fees are set up now, if I'm right, Katrina, is each dwelling unit has to pay a certain amount. Okay. For the impact fee, that's how they're charged. So the developer, yeah, so the developer, he would just get, like I said, 100 units and 30% of them are gonna be, so that would be 30 units, 30 dwelling units. It would not have to pay the impact fee. Okay.
Does anyone else on the committee have any comments concerning this particular item?
Is there a timeline on this, Mr. Chair? Is this is a permanent from here on out?
For the affordable housing, there is not a sunset in the resolution as it is presented, specifically for the affordable housing, which is what the council would consider is the 2020-21-74 ordinance. Is there anybody else that has a question or a comment?
I have a question. So who's going to track the rents that are being paid to make sure these are still affordable?
That is a good question.
Because affordable housing rents are roughly $980 or $960. So we're having them sign a document that for 10 years they're maintaining that. But there's got to be a tracking system in place. Otherwise, you know, what are you doing? And that's one thing you'll see developers will switch. They'll mix it in. So you'll have higher end units that would get the full impact fee, and you have lower end units because the higher end units are going to pay the way for the lower end. But if you make it where the lower end has a benefit to doing them, you'll see more affordable housing be built.
Yes, sir.
So,
I believe that the city council, that the ordinance that we have written now would be, I believe it's 20 to 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. If we go with 10 years.
Well, then the rents go up in 10 years.
Yeah, in 10 years, then, you know, we're right back to where we started from. We don't have affordable housing any longer.
Well, one of the concerns too is as you go along, depending on how the state sets that number, because the state kind of sets the affordable housing number. In 10 years, if that number's not the right number, you're gonna have some pretty rundown places because they have to take the rents to reinvest in the repairs. And so it kind of makes sense to have a range in there. So you have some places paying a little more so you can afford to maintain the places. But I think we want to get some movement pretty quick. I was just concerned that we wouldn't be able to track what's going on. And now, if you track it for 30 years, that's a big job tracking however many units.
Mr. Cooperline, is there a time frame associated with the proposed ordinance that you're aware of?
Well, I heard the request of a sunset as a time frame, and then I've heard 10, 30 years. Could you be more specific as to what time frame subject to?
Well, as it's currently proposed and written, 2020-2174, is there a time frame for how long those units would have to meet the affordable housing standard?
Yes, sir. It's in sub 4.3, it's 30 years.
30 years.
And the definition, as Councilman Sampson pointed out, is set by the state. And so we are subject to however that definition fluctuates. And it generally does come down from the federal government. But Mr. Councilmember Sampson makes a good point. It's one that Mr. Young and actually Mr. Toy and I spoke earlier today. It's one of a practical matter of day-to-day bookkeeping and record keeping. The ordinance mentions that the city manager's office or the designee would be responsible for verifying the use of the development. But how you're going to track it could be tough undertaking.
I see.
And can I have a follow-up?
Yes.
So one of the things is if you have a sunset, then that tracking's at only a set period of time at least, because if you keep adding on units and you're tracking them for 30 years, you could get to where you're adding on quite a few, because the way this is written, it's not just limited to apartment dwellings. It could be single family dwellings, which is what we'd like to see, but you get a mix of that, then you're not tracking it. And there could be some real ramifications for people if you come back and say, hey, I need to get paid that impact fee you didn't pay. Because you're not charging affordable housing now.
I think one of the concerns that I want to make sure that we don't create a problem for developers is I want to make it easy for folks who want to develop and invest in affordable housing inside the city to be able to do that with as little impact from us as possible. That ideally, right?
And that's why I think the sunset that was proposed by the group, that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. And two, that after 10 years, whatever happens with it. Because hopefully what we hope would happen, I would think as any community, you hope values go up so that affordable housing becomes a little more valuable than affordable housing. That's what you hope happens. But if you lock us in for 30 years and let's say we have a renaissance in value and everything's going up, but we've locked them in for 30 years, we can't charge a market rate. You could be putting them in quite a stretch there.
Right. So is there a motion as the recommendation of City Council Ordinance 2020-2174. Mr. Chair. Yes.
I do understand the urgency here. This has been on the table for a few meetings. I do want to remind you all that if you think that the next ordinance is going to pass, you're not going to have impact fees on affordable housing or anything for another 12 months. So if you would like to see some revisions here, my office, Mr. Young's office will have time to look at things such as if you want to bring it down to 10 years. Hillsborough County was mentioned. They require a 7-year commitment. If you want to go somewhere other than 30 and you want to see some other language, you do have time. I do realize we all want to see this locked in and put behind us, move on to other issues regarding affordable housing, but we do have time if you think that the moratorium is going to be extended for another 12 months.
Thank you, Mr. Coberline. So I would entertain a motion either way if we want to set this item aside so that staff can continue to work on it. And
I'd like to make a motion that we set this aside for staff to review the moratorium.
I'll second that, because if we're doing it 12 months anyway, might as well do it right, so we're not pushed because of that.
Yes. So we have a motion to set it aside for staff to work on in a second. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
Mayor Witt,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Dial,
Yes.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Pridgeon. I have to unmute him.
I'm trying.
Yes, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Scott,
Yeah.
Mr. Sweat,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yeah.
and Chairman Green.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so we move on to the next item, which is the review of 2020, the City Council Ordinance 2020-2175. And so same, this is the affordable housing. I believe this is the waiving of impact fees for 12 months. Is there any discussion concerning that?
I do want to say one thing.
Yes.
I wanted to let everybody know.
Please come up.
It's really hard to turn the audio, I'm sorry.
I'm Katrina, customer service manager. I just wanted to let everybody know, just in case they're not aware of today, as of 4 o'clock, what are fees that we have waived up until this point since we started this. Right now, the total impact fees waived have been $212,793.59. So that's between commercial and residential.
How many units?
There's been about 30 to 35.
Can you give us a breakdown between the commercial and the residential?
Yes, so the commercial impact fees that's been waived so far has been $91,898. And the residential has been $120,895.
How many of those residential are new homes?
Probably more, let's see. About 22 of them.
Good, we need more homes.
But I was going to say, it seems to me that it's having the desired effect.
The hope is with the reduced fees, we can boost some growth and have some more economic development, because on the other end of that, that's 35 new accounts, hopefully buying water and sewer and gas.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a good thing.
Absolutely. Mr. Graham, do you have any other questions?
I agree with y'all that it, the development and all that, but we still got to pay for what we're doing, so we can't do it forever. Because that's why impact fees are what they are, is to not impact the system. But I agree with doing it this time, state of the economy and everything now. But at some point, we've got to get people paying what they need to.
Yes, sir. Any of the other committee members, have any comments concerning impact fees, the 12-month waiver?
If I could say something?
Yes, sir.
We do have a lot of plans going on for this city, and we do have a water issue. And these impact fees are used for the utilities department to offset the impacts, to help pay to get the infrastructure put in, to help pay to do things for utilities to make sure that the utilities get to these customers. I believe Donna had looked up and said that we have 1.6.
On 1,698,000, of which about 600,000 is already
600 that
committed to the
will have to be
railroad
paid
project.
back to the Bell Road. So we're looking at running our impact fees account pretty low. So in order to have money for growth, for this growth, to add on for infrastructure, we need to pay attention to what we do so that we don't fall short. Because there's a lot of grants out there, but grants aren't gonna pay for everything.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman,
Yes.
I have to agree with, the mayor and with Mike. Our budgets are cut pretty thin as it is. And I mean, I understand, that we need to give incentives and things like that, but the construction industry right now is pretty robust. And I think at the point, like Ms. Madeira has said, we've already down $200-some thousand. That could do quite a bit for our infrastructure. And at this point, with the way the economy's going, especially the building and all, I just don't see that it would be prudent to wait them another 12 months.
Gotcha. Any other comments? Yes.
On those 35 accounts, do we know what the utility income is on those a month? Is there a way we could query that information? Because I'd just be kind of interested to know, because I know you get that bill every month pretty regular, and you can pay a lot back toward the cost. I mean, I got a couple bills I can think of that's paying for a lot of this. But I mean, in general, if revenues offset expenses, it's like running any other business. But for years and years, the city sat here and we've not seen housing increases. I mean, we've not really, we've seen about 11, 12,000 people living in the city. And there's a reason for that. Developers are going to take the money where it's cheaper. If you can save $8,000 a house and you can build just outside city limits, you're going to do it. Isn't that right? But that's one of the things that's just a concern. I mean, to me, I think the focus is residential, but I mean, and I think you're right. We're going to need commercial impact fees to come back at some point because there's a lot of money tied up with them. Residential, I see a little differently because when you go out there and you already got a line and you just add a tab. I mean, yeah, it costs something, but man, 9,000 to 10,000 a house is a big fight for a family to make when it just, maybe buildings growing, but people's incomes aren't growing. So, and it's a fee that is passed on to citizens and we pay for it in our taxes too. That's just my comment on that.
So I think for me, I think we're having the desired effect with what we've seen already with the temporary waiver of the fees as far as encouraging growth and development. And, I think that for me, I'm in favor of continuing that for 12 months and reevaluate at the end of the 12 months. And see what is that measured growth? Because once those folks come on, they're on forever. Those properties are on forever. And so I think that I'm in favor of continuing it for 12 more months and seeing where we are.
Well, one thing that we've talked about, and I don't know that we've gotten very far with it, but we need to, and if we do this and continue, like you're saying, if it's $8,000 a house, it don't have to be. We need to look at what our fees are now and see if they're too high. I mean, it's not a matter of waiving them or 8,000. It could.
I just threw that number out. I'm not exactly sure what the number is.
That's what I'm saying is we need to really look at what our costs and fees are and see if they're justified as far as surrounding communities and what our cost is to do. Like our staff's talking about, they gotta have money to do these improvements, and, but we don't wanna burden people to the point where they can't just not people to build it. So we need to look at it.
So roughly for the impact fees on a residential, you're looking at $1,050. We had one, and I'll take for example, one commercial, we waived $8,000 for their fees. So, I mean, on the commercial side, we're losing out a lot for the city. The residential, I mean, like I said, you're only looking at $1,050 most of the time. So that's for some of our stuff. The commercial is a major thing. We have quite a few commercials. One of them was 8,000, one of them was 6,438.
But commercial is exactly what is gonna drive jobs inside the city and inside the county is, and that's why most of the folks are probably in the room today who are not on the committee. They're concerned about those jobs. And so I think we need to I think this is a way that we can encourage development in our community. I think on a temporary basis with the 12 months, but you encourage the development and then you reevaluate. And much like we did when we went through the minutes from 2 years ago, we were able to evaluate a rare opportunity. Did we get those grants that we thought we were going to get? Were they in those amounts? And so I think if we support waiving these impact fees for a 12-month period, we can reevaluate. We'll have a bigger picture of the impact that has had on the community and on the city budget, quite frankly. But what we're here to do tonight is to determine whether or not the advisory committee would recommend waiving for 12 months the utility impact fees. And I don't know if we're going to recommend that or not, but I'll entertain a motion to do that or not do it, either way.
Mr. Chairman, can I add one thing?
Yes, sir.
So I had the ability to actually put together a rebate program for utilities, mainly in the gas, obviously. But one thing that we've seen, and this program has been going on now for some 3+ years, we were able to add, to your point, correct, we were able to add 300+ units. Those are burner tips for 15 years. That is correct. What we chose to do under my direction was I went residential first, to Mr. Sampson's point, and that worked out ideal. What we did though, and was approved by council, when we got to the commercial side, we changed the entire program. So we still did incentivize, and we still do to this day. We write our checks for the appliances that they put in, gas versus electric. But we had 2 separate scales, if you will. They had different weights. So we encouraged the commercial growth, but yet we didn't give them the same thing that we did a house of 4 with a single income.
Sure.
So just something to add in there that even though we want to look at the impact fees from a whole, for the rebate program, we split them and done commercial residential, and that worked out ideal for us. So they still get an incentive, but they still pay. So we're still, at Mayor's point, we're still able to add to that infrastructure, as we're going to talk about later in the meeting. That's our need to improve our infrastructure. So we kind of had the best case scenario for everybody.
But one of the things I think that's different maybe for gas is when you talk about folks have a choice whether or not they choose to have natural gas appliances.
Correct.
There's no choice about whether or not you're going to tap in to wastewater. You have to have that.
And that's a good point. But what we found is when the commercial come to us, they were already ready to go. It was just, like I say, this is just part of the equation that I want to factor in there. That when they got ready to go, for Chipotle, for example, when they got ready to build here, the incentive was there for them, but they were already looking at the site. So we were able to offer them that as electric versus gas. So the impact fee may not have to be waived completely, but and it may be the 12-month duration that we want to look at that. We may not want to waive it completely, but we may want to set one up for commercial and then one for residential so that everybody's getting fair shake.
Sure.
Just to put that up.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, I'm here on growth. And growth, we're gonna have to make concessions in order to get it, whether it be residential or commercial. Now, back during the downturn, when everybody's property taxes dropped, and our taxes coming in dropped. Okay, the tax assessor can only increase no more than 2% a year. So we're still not back up to what those houses were back then. But every new house that's built is coming in at 100% taxes. Because that house is worth $200,000. So we're getting the taxes off of that amount
Every year.
every year. Whereas the older homes, we're only getting right around, I believe it's up to around 50% of what the value was back, increased at the time.
Sure.
By going 2% each year. Regardless of what the property value is, they can only increase the tax value by 2%. So with all the new, even commercial properties that would come in, that's a higher tax base that we're getting in. We're having more money come in.
And if it costs more money for those folks to hook up inside the city limits versus in the county, I think it's prudent for us to keep our costs as low as possible. That's just me personally, but or if not, those business owners are going to have those developments occur outside the city limits.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can I say something?
Absolutely, yes.
I talk to a lot of builders in the area. I'm associated with the industry. I talk to a lot of builders. I know the waiving of impact fees gets a lot of buzz out there. And when the city has the ability to do that because they have water and sewer, if somebody has a choice to build in the city with water and sewer, and the county, which has to, or with put a septic tank in a well, those costs are still there. So it is an incentive to people to look towards the city because they have that ability to waive those fees. So it is creating a lot of buzz out there right now. So from the street standpoint, work should create some buzz out there. I understand that there's some concerns about the capital dollars for things on the road. But example, on Highway 47, when I go down there, I personally have to guarantee a loan for $1.5 million for the grant, me personally. And so maybe on that project, maybe we would come back to and ask for some waivers, some fees, because we're spending $1.5 million in capital improvements. And so we may ask for a small waiver of some fees. In that case, it's kind of flipped it around. So maybe you grant a waiver back then on that one, but we brought 1.5 million to the table too. So there's different components to it, and they all have to kind of work together. But I do know your impact fees right now carry some weight. I hear the buzz out there. People say, man, because like lumber prices right now per house are up about $16,000 per house for lumber. So you need something for the builders to kind of get jazzed a little bit to kind of pull that weight back down a little bit because it is a affordability issue. So from my standpoint, I hear the buzz when doctors talking about it.
Thank you.
Mr. Green, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are we looking at doing this just in the city? Or are we looking at doing this in the county too? Because if the buildings in the county, they're subject to the same impact fees as
To the city, yes. Yeah, no, so it's for the entire, for the entirety. So I misspoke when I was comparing the city and the
I
county.
want to get that clear. Another thing too, I noticed like when we do have commercial buildings in the city, in the past, we had this leasing place or whatever, where it's 40 dozen on it is. The city then waived tax rate hikes and all that when they were brought in as an incentive. So, that's something we might want to balance out, that we don't give them tax incentive breaks if we're going to give impact fee breaks, because then they're taking both ends of the gamut away from us. So.
Anyone else wish to speak? Is there a motion to recommend or to not recommend the waiver of fees to the city council concerning ordinance 2020-2175? Either way.
I'd like to recommend that we make a motion to waive the fees one more year.
So we would support the proposed city council
That's
ordinance
right.
2020-2175. I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Just want to clarify, the motion is to recommend to city council the approval of city council resolution 2020-2175, correct?
That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
Mayor Witt,
Yes.
Mr. Brown, Mr. Dial,
No.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Pridgeon,
No.
Mr. Scott,
No.
Mr. Sweat,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mayor, Chairman Green.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
All right, I think the next item on the agenda is discussion of possible action concerning Lake City utilities for the industrial park. Mr. Sweat.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take and begin by stating that we're going to give you a lot of information here on the North Florida Mega Park Industrial Park. These are estimations based on information we've been given in reference to the park and its expectations. In order for us to give you more precise cost, time, and materials, the city is going to require hard numbers for the amount of water, sewage, and gas to adequately construct and provide infrastructure. In order for the city utility department to make an exact determination of utilities, it's going to be imperative that the city and the county develop a master plan. Based on that, though, I want to give you an update on the wastewater treatment plant. Columbia County, along with Jones Edmonds, are finalizing plans for the construction of a water treatment plant. Members of Jones Edmonds, Columbia County, Warehouser, and the city of Lake City met on November 17th to view the area of the proposed water treatment plant and discuss location of a spray field on the site. Myself and Bill Fish, who has been identified as the person from the city of Lake City who will be our project representative during this project, represented the city. Bid specs are due to go out by the end of January. That's for the early out equipment. That's equipment that's going to have to be purchased ahead of time. The county is looking to advertise for bidding for the project and equipment sometime after January or February, with the intention of contractor bid specs going out by Jones Edmond by the end of March. The contractor bid package will go out in April, and it's estimated that construction will start in mid-May 2021, and this is based on contractor availability and equipment delivery. The county is going to work to try to fast track this project. The expansion of the facility will be conducted in phases. Now, phase one is going to be the plant construction, and a spray field is going to be used for effluent treatment. Now, phase two basically is an upgrade phase in the injection well. There is no assurance that a permit will be allowed for this purpose at this time, and if possible, could take 2 to 3 years for the permit to be completed. Now, Jones Edmond and the county have already applied to for grant funding through 2 different funds through DEP for springs and alternative water supply funds. Now, the final phase would be plant expansion. That's phase 3. It should be noted that when the city takes possession of the facility, though, after phase 1, it then will become the city's responsibility to fund expansion and apply for permits. The county has indicated, though, that they would partner with the city in search of grant funding for these purposes. All right, I do want to bring this up. I know this is a sore subject with a lot of folks, but leachate has been a concern with the wastewater department because they're, one of the things for the county is the treatment of waste, leachate waste. The county, I've spoken to them, and after speaking with them, they've agreed to that we must sample all leachate before it is delivered to the facility, and they will supply sample results along with a chain of custody to the city, and they will pre-treat leachate that requires such and will ensure all deliveries meet the minimum requirements to be entered into our system. We do have that. I have spoken to Kevin Kirby. That has been a guarantee that they will, because they've done this in the past when they sent it off to Baldwin. You know, all these things were treated before they sent it to them. It's all sampled. So that has been addressed for leachate. Gas going out to the park. Currently, there's a 3-mile long beginning at the Florida Gateway College and going out there to Tower Road, a 6-inch medium density gas main located in the south right of way of US 9. The gas main supplies a single customer at an average of 30 therms per hour, basically the prison out there. The city supplies this gas at 32 pounds. Now, you know, people are all asking what we can supply, and I think Steve's probably going to stand up and address part of this. If they just want 5 pounds out there at an end user, then we can give 110,000 cubic feet. But if they want 32 pounds out there at the site, you're looking at about 22,000 cubic feet. You got to remember these calculations that I've gotten, Mr. Brown and I worked, he's given me, are based on the fact that we have one customer. That we're adding on one customer. Every customer you add draws off that line. So it all depends on what you want out there and what we desire to have going to that site. Currently, right now, we are a distribution system. We supply gas at 32 pounds. Tell me if I'm wrong, Steve, but if we go up above 300 pounds, is that what it is? We go up above 300 pounds, we become a transmission system. Currently, we do not have the expertise to handle a 300-pound or greater system. The bigger problem you have is, without knowing what you want, what the county desires at that site, it's hard to determine what we would put in. We could put in what we say, a line from Brooker.
The line would come from
Ellisville to the site to supply gas at what, 300 pounds? You looked at about what, 10 to 11 $million?
Yeah, feasibility study come back and it was in that range, 10 to 11. Now that was based on a 240 an hour decatherm user, which is provided to me by the county.
The problem you end up with though is if you have more of a draw than you can supply off that header, then you're doing it once again. You're going to have to increase the size there to bring that much gas in. So we need to have a fixed number so that we understand. Do we put a 700-pound header in? I mean, do we come directly straight off Florida Gas with a 700-pound header or a 300-pound header? Do we maintain the 32 pounds that we have on our header now? So these are things we have to understand in order for us to give you an idea of what we need to put in there as far as gas. Now, currently, People's Gas has been contracted with the city to supply 100 decatherms per day. But this is only in an emergency. And basically, what People's Gas does is it maintains our pressure on our header at the east and down to about 25 pounds. There's, what, 2 sets of regulators there?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, there's 2 sets of regulators there, and all they're there to do is maintain 25 pounds on that header. The header drops, and normally you don't see that, what, January, February, early March?
Historically, that's when we see the majority of it. Yes, sir.
The rest of the time, those valves stay closed. We're able to supply all the loads that we have. It's only during cold weather, in extreme cold weather, that you may see those regulators even open. So it is not to supply the mega park with gas through that line. That is not the purpose of that connection, People's Gas. Steve, do you want to make any other comments?
No, sir, just clarify real quick on the demands as they're needed. We definitely need those hard numbers. We got to know what's going to the building in order to figure out what the capacity in the line is and how we're going to be able to supply it. So when we get a number that comes in one day at 5 pounds and another one that comes out at 10 pounds, those numbers are never going to be able to provide anything. What we generally get a question of is, can we provide 55,000 cubic feet, for example? That number cannot be derived. You cannot come up with that number without having that first number of what's going to be going to the building. We always know the city's going to provide 32 PSI. That's a given. That's what I push through my station. That's the MAP on our system, and that's what we report to the government. But what goes to the building determines what the capacity through the pipe is. Now, we can do that calculation very easily, but we are very, very seldom, and I would say next to never be given that actual use to the building. Been 1 or 2 discussions, but it's never been nailed down. So when you ask, can we provide capacity? The answer is always up in the air. It's always up in the air. We never know the second part of the equation. So therefore, it looks like we can't provide it, or it's been discussed, can we, or could we, or should, shouldn't. We don't know until we have that. And then, and in these, moving forward, these economic development meetings, those are numbers we're gonna have to start looking at in order to give you firm confirmation of capacity.
Mr. Brown, can you mind stepping to the podium just because I have a question and I want to just make sure that anyone who's online can hear as well. So when it comes to natural gas, and it's not a simple matter of putting the piping in the ground and not knowing what's coming. You're having to know exactly what facility is going there and what their needs are.
So yes, so the way we work is we can increase pressure and get volume. We don't have to have a 12-inch pipe. And in fact, the entire city of Lake City is filled off with a 3-inch pipe, but it's at 800 pounds, which we cut down to 100. So if we want to feed the mega site, we can feed them anything they want to build out there. But you got to have that dedicated line, that dedicated thing. So without knowing what we're going to need, it's a moving target. We don't know what to put in the ground. So we don't want to go spend, for example, $10 to $11 million putting this infrastructure in the ground, and then the proposed customer back out may or may not come. And if they do or don't, then we've got this infrastructure in the ground, and we don't know if we can supply, to what degree. 240 decks is the biggest that I've been asked for. That will require a transmission line. To Mr. Sweat's point, at that point, all of our OQ, the gas will do the pipe is the same, but we have to get OQ'd in the transmission at that point. That may require a revision to our budget, because at that point, we may have to add additional staff. All of that has got to be talked about, and this is the kind of stuff in this committee is a good place to bring it up, so the council knows that there's a whole lot goes into this. Whenever we just get a simple, can you provide 55,000 cubic feet an hour? I can answer that in a matter of minutes. Answer to that's yes. But when you get up to 240,000 cubic feet an hour, it's dicey, because that 110 is going to be kind of a breaking line at 5 pounds to the building. But if they need 10 pounds to the building, that 110 may be off the table. We may be down to 90,000. All of these calculations we can provide, again, pretty quick. Another caveat to that is I'd like to add, as far as just, this has been brought up before, why didn't the city just go ahead and put some pipe in the ground? Well, obviously, as I just explained, we want to know what we're putting in the ground for budgetary purposes. But the 192 rule for the federal government is if we don't use it within 10 years, we have to remove that pipe. So we have restrictions beyond just budget, county, city, economic development, so forth and so on. We're governed to the federal rules on how we can and cannot operate a distribution system. So there's a whole genre to go to that, if you will. But to answer to your question, yes, we need to know exactly what's going to get. We don't have to know the name of the company. We need to know what their fixed number is to say yes or no.
And just, this is a little bit different. I know we're talking about the east side of town, but just out of curiosity, if we're talking about 47, and we're talking about the proposed development that Mr. Stewart was talking about.
Correct.
So how would that relate there? So we have a pipe up to so far. He's not exactly certain of who's coming in. So how would you determine what he needs and what we would need to do to support him?
So that was the reason for my question to Mr. Stewart. The sooner we can get that number. So right now we're at 90%, for example. There's going to be a section of pipe that's going to come in there from underneath the interstate, which is 6 inches. That's where Bell reduces up to the biggest point is underneath Interstate 75. Right now, the plans show reducing back down to 4 inch, which would feed most anything. But if Mr. Scott has an idea, and he showed us a drawing, that there's going to be a lot of residential dwellings versus a lot of commercial. At that point, we may want to get with Jamie Bell and say, hey, let's go ahead and run some numbers for major industrial, motels, water heaters, so forth and so on. So that was the reason for asking the question, can we get kind of a timeline? Because that helps us prepare now for what's going, looking ahead, what's going to come in the future. I don't want to put a piece of 4 inch in there and bottleneck it and then have to go back up to 6 inch, for example. The cost from 4 to 6 inch is minimal. But we don't want to, again, put a bunch of infrastructure in the ground and not ever use it either. So being able to get those hard numbers helps us in our day to day.
And what have we done, if anything, gas-wise? What have we done concerning Bell Road? How have we done anything out there?
So what we've done there is when we come into it, because we knew Bell Road and 47 were our closest low hanging fruit. We knew those were going to develop before the mega site. We went ahead and made that decision to upgrade that pipe to 6 inch. It's as big as I can get it. It's tied onto the existing 6 inch, and we done a loop system. So we prepared for that future expansion from a commercial industrial plan. So that was all put into place back when we originally done it. Mr. Dahl and I worked on that. We put everything in out there. The only thing we did not do is we put medium density instead of high density because that's what we tied on to. That would be the only difference there. But regulator step down stations, all of that could be, again, if say an Anderson Columbia come in, which is an 80,000 cubic foot an hour versus 20,000 cubic foot an hour, we have a plan in place where that could be affected. And what I was just explaining to Mr. Scott, if we knew ahead of time that even if we just are looking at 4 restaurants, 1 motel, and then a few gas stations, that could dictate what we want to do.
So when it comes to natural gas, what I'm hearing is it's not as simple as pre-plumbing the infrastructure and waiting on someone coming. You have to know the end user's needs to be able to determine what we need.
Correct. You get it correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I know if you have too small a pipe or two, not enough, that you can't feed enough for a big development. But is there a problem with putting too big a pipe to where you don't have enough customers on it that it does?
So natural gas, fortunately, is not. We do not have that problem. If we put, for an example, Bell Road, we went ahead and upgraded that 6 inch because we knew the area was 99% chance it's going to go industrial or commercial. So we went ahead and accounted for that. So we have now what we refer to as capacity.
Right.
So we have extra capacity in that line. So if you can imagine that system being looped versus a single 2 inch going out there, the 2 inch will probably feed everybody. Now that we have a capacity in that 6 inch loop, we basically got gas in reserve, if you will, which is similar to what the transmission lines do. You account for the math equation would be P1, P2, which is pressure, and then distance, length, and size of pipe. All of that gives you a standard cubic feet an hour. So that's basically the way we measure. And that's the reason why we upsize everything going underneath 47. Anytime we go underneath the interstate, we go as big as we can because it's such a hard drill. For example, north on I-10, we just pull pipe under there. We're not even connected to it yet. This is 6 inch laying under there. If anything ever develops up north of town, we've accounted for it. Even though we haven't tied to it yet, it will eventually tie to that Bell Road as soon as we acquire all that property.
Let's see. Any questions concerning, just since we got you at the podium, I don't want to get up and hop back down.
So I think you asked the question. The cost differential to the 4 to 6 inch pipe is minimal.
It's minimal.
But so would it make sense to go ahead and plan to do the 6 inch pipe on the 47 corridor? Because I mean, yeah, I know you need the end user. I'm going to invest in going to be big enough long term because there's real potential on that corridor.
So yeah, so to answer your question is if we were going to do strictly residential, we would run all 4 inch because that's going to feed a water heater is minimal, a stove, a range is minimal, all that stuff. If we seen the build out potential like happened on 90, and this did happen, we've actually bored 90 twice to make sure that we have enough capacity under there. And that's what would happen next. As that property gets sold and it's no longer leftover inherited property and new property owners purchase it, they're more likely to give those easements to allow us to get by and get underneath those interstates because everybody wants that growth. So to your point, what we would do is we could account for 6 inch all the way from the time we can start it. And then if anything ever come in bigger than that, we would have to shoot the interstate.
What kind of turnaround time would you have? So if we had, for example, east of town at the industrial park, if we had an end user and they said, hey, we want to start construction this day, we need lines in place on it. What kind of turnaround time, knowing that you need to know the end user, can the gas department provide to put that line out there to them?
So going back to, this is the thing here. If you do steel on that 300 to 700 pound range, it's all got to be welded. The gas department won't be able to put that in. It's actually steel pipe will have to be x-rayed. But contractors have to do that. Now that's in that feasibility study. It's in there for contractors to do it. But it's as we've seen historically, engineering can last a year. I wouldn't think one single dedicated line, but but we still have to factor in easements that may or may not have to be required, DOT right-of-ways, permitting, all of that together, you could be looking at a year pretty easy to get that gas line.
So if someone wanted to develop in the industrial park and they needed natural gas, they couldn't get that natural gas inside of a year?
Not necessarily. So we got two options. The first option would obviously be go back to the table with Peoples Gas. The problem with that is Peoples has bought the gas from Southern Natural Gas. So Southern Natural owns the pipeline. They've already acquired all the capacity. So we would have to buy it at a higher rate. So as if I'm paying $3 a decatherm for Florida gas transmission, which is what's passed on to my customers at a very low rate of 90 cents a therm at the burner tip, we may be at $15 a decatherm because we're having to buy it secondhand. Now that number again is negotiable depending on how that would work out, but I'm just using it for example. So the cost to the end user that the county would have may be substantially higher. And the end user says, well, I want the gas, but now it's higher than it is. So there's one factor. The second thing is we can always bring in a bottle truck and feed them off the bottle truck. Obviously, transporting gas is just like propane. There's issues with that, but still, there are ways to do it temporarily. So say, for example, to answer your question, if we had that customer come in tomorrow, and I want to use 240 decatherms an hour as an example, if we had to have that, if it was a make or break deal, we could bring in a bottle truck and they could actually set them up. And when I say this, we hydro test our line in usually 5-year increments. I feed the entire city off these bottle trucks, 1,500 decks a day. So if they just need 240 out there, for example, we could bring that truck in and feed them until we got this pipeline in. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of if it's going to be financially.
I see. So the developer wouldn't necessarily have to have that year delay. We could temporarily take care of it through the bottle truck while we're going through the process of putting in the infrastructure.
And then that would be something that obviously the council would want to vote on and say, yeah, we want to pass this on to the county, see if the end user wants to spend this much money, because all that cost would have to be spread out, which was, a whole nother issue. But yeah, there are ways to get gas to sites that don't have gas. It's just a matter of it's going to be, at the end of the day, is it going to cost effective?
And when it comes to city gas employees, if we move up over that 300 limit that we were talking about before, is there additional certifications and training they have to acquire?
Yes,
the city employees have to acquire, and there's a time frame for that as well for those guys to acquire those services.
Well, it would be the day they turn gas on. We're not allowed to work on that system. So our system is set up as strictly a distribution system. And that's all we're OQ'd to do. Now, we're OQ'd again through the state of Florida, through the 2512, and then the 192 is the federal rule that basically encompasses all of us. That rule was written specifically for transmission lines. In order for us to comply and have that line out there, all of my staff would have to go through that training of their OQ qualifications. Along with that, any equipment that may be needed to work on that steel gas main push pressures. So there could be, and that's what I would say, there's going to be two parts to this. The $10 or $11 million to put the pipe in the ground, that's engineering. I think it's $1.5 million for the tap from FGT. All of that is factored into that first number. But the city council is also then going to have to revise my budget to allow me to do this extra training, to allow me to put this extra equipment on. So the cost for just the gas main to the mega site is not only just that. It's an addition to what we're going to have to do to be able to maintain and operate.
Okay.
Do we already have numbers for what the training costs will be and the equipment costs? I didn't know how far we went down that.
So the reason we have not gone down that road yet is because the number changes daily. It's so fluid. We never have, literally the number from the county may be a week to 2 weeks and it usually changes. So until we got that customer that said, we're really pressing hard on it, we haven't even looked into that.
I know we've kind of gotten off topic a little bit, Ms. Sweat.
That's okay.
Thank you for indulging us here. One more question, so I'm trying to keep you from coming up and down to the podium since we have you here.
Sure.
So I know Mr. Sweat did the PowerPoint at a city council meeting where he talked about gas lines are mapped at 95%. We have about 5% that are not mapped. My question to you is, timeframe wise, is there something we can do to map the other 5%? What's the resources that you would need from city council to make that happen? Or is that unrealistic to ever be at 100%?
No, sure. So what we're doing now is we've actually implemented that, actually prior to Mr. Sweat even coming on board. What we started doing when Mr. Dial put the GIS system in place, we started having our locators, myself and distribution and collection. When we do a locate now, we're using GIS and actually the locate tickets themselves, and we're submitting that to the GIS department. So what we done in the gas system that's different is I had all my valves by federal law, I have to know where they are. So we went and stood on the valves. So we knew all the valves, and then we kind of connected the dots from paper to digital. So that gave us a huge advantage that those guys didn't have.
I see.
So because of the rule, we were able to automatically jump leaps ahead. Then at that point, the 5% is really service lines that we don't know where they are, or where it may have been shown on the old map on the right-hand side of the road that we're correcting. But as we're doing locates, if you can imagine as fast as this county's growing, we're getting locates 10, 12, 15 in an hour sometimes. So we're doing so much locating, these guys are redundantly going back over themselves and checking for each other. So to say it will be done, the answer to that is yes. And we're working on as fast as we can.
Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions?
Thank you. That's very cool.
Thank you.
All right,
Steve, before you walk away,
He's our.
Steve, before you walk away, the thing that I want to make sure that we understand is that $10 million, $10.5 million split in that line, that was for a 300-pound header, right?
That's what we originally set it up for, which was the number, I believe, Mr. Hunter, it was 240, correct? Yeah, that's what we based that on.
But see, that's only a 300-pound header. If something else goes in there that requires more than that, or what, we're going to be back at this all over again. Am I correct, Steve?
So yes and no. What we were going to do is if it did move forward with that, we were going to build it to spec at 300, but we would probably put an MAOP on that thing at closer to 700. Steel is very different in regards of our medium density plastic in that you can up that pressure. So where I was explaining, you don't have to have a 10-inch pipe for gas. The entire city's fed off of a 3-inch. So we would have to go back for engineering, yes. But that 10 million would account for the original, just like our line that runs from Trenton. We would want to account for that in the beginning, but there could potentially be extra engineering. So if we put it in, the customer didn't come, and another company would come later on down the line, and that number was close but not the same, we may use those numbers. And you know, we've been working with Jamie Bell at Jones Engineering to some degree with that. But yeah, there could be some additional costs.
But if the county has a end user that said, tomorrow we need to be at the industrial site tomorrow, we need natural gas, our plan is temporary bottle trucks so we get the infrastructure in there.
That's a possibility.
So we could make it happen. It would it would be expensive. It's not cheap to do it that way, and it's not easy.
Right. That's just what I want to make sure everybody understands. Is that, yeah, if we brought that truck in and they set a station up, just like they did for us, for example, that number's there. We could get that number. We don't have it again. I didn't want to have a lot of people giving me quotes on stuff if we didn't really have that in you. But yeah, there's a way to get gas. It's just at what cost.
And I think that's the point that I was wanting to make sure that we left with is when it comes to natural gas, we can provide it on short notice, temporary basis until we fill in the infrastructure.
Yes, and that would be something if you guys were to get to that point and would like for me to do a report, I'd be glad to put that together, depending on the need, and I guess that would come from the users out in that area.
But we can currently supply, we do have a gas line out there.
Right.
But it only has 32 pounds on it. It was designed, it's doing exactly what it was designed for. Nobody would have ever thought that we would have built something of this magnitude, rather than I wouldn't have at the time. But, and the extra capacity off of it, the 30 therms that's pulling off of it, if you had to split hairs, you could literally pull that 30 therms off of the 100 decks that's coming from people. So I can give you the whole capacity of that. But a lot of times we get built out in phases in the construction industry. So phase 1 may be 55,000 in 2 years. Phase 2, which is complete build out, may be 110. Well, in between that 55 and that 110, to Mr. Sweat's point, if another customer comes online, they're eating up that build out capacity. At that point, you're maxed out.
I know we're focused on north of town, south of town, east of town, just odd question. going west of town, or do we have the lines all the way down 90 to the end of the county line? Where are we at west of town?
We actually stop just before Brown Road. And I will tell you this, that as fast as they're growing out there, there is a new assisted living facility that right now we're needing easements to get to. We need them as we speak. There's a young man, a developer, I won't say name, but he's met with us and we've talked about the need for that gas. That end of town is something that we're not looking at. I think 47 from the gas standpoint, we've got it under wraps. We may upsize that 6 inch and that maybe get north of town, we've already got the interstate. Going west is something that I think that means gonna come up pretty quick. And there we are limited to right of way, DOT. And again, some of you may remember trying to get easements to get to the assisted living facility that we have now. These are really large, good user customers. The city generates the revenue of a lot of these guys because they're burning 24/7 basically.
Sure.
So we want to try and get to these guys, but we're limited out that way, and it's coming. That's something that we're gonna have to discuss in our budget.
Thank you.
You good? That's the. So let's talk about water. Currently, the city has a 12-inch supply line out there, fed by an 8-inch header that runs along US 90. This header supplies water to the 2 prisons located on the east end of Lake City and a handful of small end users. In order to supply larger loads out there at the mega park, the city of Lake City would need to install a larger header. Right now, I mean, the number that was thrown out there was a 20-inch line. I think it needs to be known though, if we put a 20-inch line in there for the 4 miles from basically up Price Creek going out there, you're looking at about $1.6 million. That is just in parts. That's with all labor being done by DNC, distribution and collection. Everybody that done in-house, you're looking at 1.6. Right? What I want to make sure we understand is, it should be noted here that the installation of this header does not mean the city of Lake City can supply the utilities at the North Florida Mega Industrial Park if the demand is greater than may be supplied by the line, or if the city, our permit has not been increased to meet these needs. So basically putting that line in and not understanding what the needs are, what they're going to be down the road, is the same thing as with the gas. We could end up in the same situation where we don't know how much is needed. Something else I want to talk to you about is, if we go ahead and we decide to put a large line out there, the installation of this line in advance of industry will require constant flushing, as the piping will become the single largest containment of water within the water department. And think about that for a moment when you think about the west end tanks that we have out here off 90. This will be the single largest container of water in the city system. The requirement will be to flush regularly, thereby increasing the amount of water not used by end users. Our recent water audit indicated that we are already flushing 5% of all treated water. We have asked Jones Edmond, and this is something Jamie's working on, is a feasibility study with the intention of identifying the size of the line to be installed in the best possible route to minimize cost and effects to the environment. Something you have to take into consideration here is the county is already applying for a permit for 2 million gallons, but that's raw water. If we're talking about potable water. So the question is, do you want to put this in, and then the possibility that we're going to spend the next 5 to 10 years flushing water out there to maintain total chlorine residual?
We have to have a 0.06 total chlorine residual in the system at all times.
So a couple of questions to talking about water. My understanding is that the city manager had requested that we do a water main routing study with Joan Edmonds. I believe he actually called it the water feasibility study, but I think Jones Edmonds said water main routing study.
That is correct.
And so when we talk about the different pipes of size of pipes and the amount of water that they hold, we haven't done the study yet. So would the study not provide the answers to what we're talking, instead of trying to guess at what we might put in the ground? do we need to do the study to determine what we can put in the ground or what we should?
I think that's a question we need to, we really need to think about. In fact, you and I were talking about this. We are able to identify the route. The problem is, without knowing the end user and what the requirements are from the park itself, I don't even think Jones Edmonds is going to be able to answer that question.
Mr. Chairman, Jamie has her hand up.
Yes.
Thank you for unmuting me. Mr. Sweat pretty much covered it. Oh, sorry, I have a baby in the background. I apologize. Yes, the water main routing study is something that we can at least do part of it regardless of the size of the pipe. We can still determine the best and most cost-effective route to take based on the site conditions, the length of pipe, and the possible water quality issues that could arise from varying lengths and looping configurations. But Mr. Sweat is correct that without knowing the end users and the demand that they will have, it is challenging to appropriately size the pipe. And like Mr. Osborne said, the chlorine residuals become a problem if your water age is too long because the water's not being used fast enough in that pipe and it just sits there. So we can definitely do the study and we can evaluate the costs of various pipe sizes with recommendations based on ranges of demands. It would just be a little bit more vague than would be ideal until we know who those end users will be and what their final demands will be.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So a couple other questions. So we talked about the water route feasibility study, Mr. Sweat, and then we also talked about a larger master planning for all utilities. So my question to you is, would you recommend to the city council that we do the feasibility study and delay the master planning, or that we put it all together? I know the council had talked about previously trying to put it all together. If you're going to do one, you do it all together. Is there a benefit to parsing it out?
I think 6-1 way have to, basically you can do it. And it's beneficial down the road. They can use those numbers for as part of the master planning. Or you can wait and do it, and if you do the master plan, and by then maybe you'll have, the county will have more information for us. Because you got to remember, when we're talking a master plan for utilities, we're not just talking about the mega park. You're talking State Road 47, you're talking about West 90, you're also talking Bell Road. It needs to be a combination of everything so we understand what we're doing, and get out ahead of it instead of being reactionary. We need to understand what's going on and plan for it accordingly.
And so if currently, I think in your PowerPoint, you said 75% of the water lines were mapped. So at least 25% are not mapped. So my question to you is, do we focus on mapping and upgrading current water infrastructure in the current city limits or the current system? I was not to say city limits system versus adding new capacities to new areas? Or is it something that we can do simultaneously?
I think we can do it in combination. I think what we've got to do, and this is something that Paul, I think you and Jason are already doing, is we're mapping out areas where we currently understand that there is we have lakes on a regular basis, basically for water into. Once we identify it, it'll be much easier once we have a CMMS system. We can do a better job of forecasting. But we need to identify those areas that we know are going to have extra stress put on it. I would say, the line going around Montgomery, Lake Montgomery, it's a 15-inch terracotta line. We know that line, you're out there on a regular basis, am I correct?
Pretty often on 30 years.
Yeah. Brian?
Yes, so we were going last year to manholes, going down behind Valley Street, change that whole system. The utility system needs to be really looked at and worked on. I got a crew right now working with Aaron Donald on an old 6-inch water main. It's being repaired right now.
In fact, that's where I was going next with this Bell Road. You'll allow me to go ahead here real quick. At this time, the Bell Road project is shovel ready to receive about 60 to 70,000 gallons per day from the Baker County rest area and work. That being said, there is an additional capacity to receive about 50,000 gallons per day, thereby allowing the construction of 1 to 2 small end users right there. The force main to 25A is ready for future expansion at this time. Is that correct, Brian? And the gas header is near completion. I think the only thing that's left to do out there is do a tie-in at 441.
Yeah, we're completed with the installation. We're just waiting to do that tie-in when we refer to going north up underneath the interstate.
So in order to prepare this system though for future use, the following has to be done. The complete project to reroute existing sewage piping and facilitate the installation of a lift station over towards Young's Park to send effluent to kick ladder. This will minimize the amount of sewage sent to that 15-inch terracotta line supplying the St. Margaret Street plant around Lake Montgomery. The total cost for this project is about $4.4 million. Take about 3 years to complete.
That's what I'd estimate.
So, I mean, you're talking about right now, as far as Bill Road is concerned, you have a shovel-ready project, the place for projects right now. Small ones. You could put those in there. If the decision is made to facilitate that line in the lift station, you're doing 2 things there. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The first one is you're actually putting more of the sewage over to kick ladder, which takes a little pressure off the St. Margaret Street. And at the same time takes off some of the pressure off of that line going by Lake Montgomery, which will extend the life and allow us the opportunity to plan how we're going to replace or what we're going to do with the line going around with Lake Montgomery. So it allows us the opportunity to do things in a planned method instead of going out there, like Brian said, a few minutes ago, and repairing, a line here, a line there. So the bang for the buck, $4.4 million, what you're going to get out of that is you're going to increase the amount going to kick ladder. You're going to take some off of the line going at Lake Montgomery, and you're going to be able to put in a larger project up there at the north end station.
When it comes to, as you referenced, the terracotta piping, does the city have an overall plan for replacing the terracotta piping? I know it's come up a couple of times that it's old and it's an issue. So my question is, do we know where it's at? Do we have a plan to replace that piping?
I think you've identified the location of all terracotta, it's that we know.
Generally, what happens with that is the infrastructure around the city is so old. A lot of the times, no, we do not know where all the terracotta pipe is. Generally, we find it when it caves in, we have breaks and things like that. The majority of it, we do know where it is. The problem with terracotta is once you touch it, it starts breaking. That's the big problem that we have with the one that goes down around Lake Montgomery. That's the 15 inches, pretty much to full capacity right now. And that would be a line that you would really not want to even try to attempt to replace. It can be done, but it's going to be very expensive. So what we have thought about doing, and the 4 million or whatever it was Mr. Sweat was talking about, that came about by the study that Jones Edmond did, the capacity study from Bell Street to St. Margaret. What it refers to is a lot of the choke points and upsizing and different scenarios they came up with to increase the flow coming from Bell Street to get it down to the south. What one of the proposals look at was twofold. One, to get more flow to kick ladder, and the other was to be able to put in a lift station around Young's Park and put a dedicated force main to tie in on Sisters Welcome Road with the force main that already goes to kick ladder, and we could take some of that flow off of that terracotta pipe, which will eliminate a disaster that's basically waiting to happen. We could still keep the terracotta pipe for the gravity and stuff that comes into it, but we would divert the biggest flow off of it and send it to kick ladder, and in fact, help us give us more time to find a different route and alternative to replacing that terracotta.
Is there a funding source that's available for doing something like replacing terracotta that we know is a problem, and when it starts breaking? So in other words, are there grants, are there other avenues to receive funding that would take on the complete replacement of terracotta?
They have some what they call hardening grants out here, the DEO grants. I have one out here now that I've applied for to rehab several of our lift stations, get new generators for some of our lift stations. And they have different types where you come in and they help you replace your old infrastructure and things like that. And right now we were focusing on all our old lift stations because that is one of our more critical things to get them up and going and pump the sewage. And then I've already, Jamie has talked several times about all kinds of different grants that we can apply for to help us in this endeavor.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna go ahead and talk briefly on the I-75 State Road 47 project.
Yes, sir.
As Paul said earlier, the schedule for phase 1 and phase 2, 90% completed drawings and early out equipment list is expected by the first week of January 2021. 100% completed drawings expected the last week of January. Out to bid by late February to early March. Work expected to begin in June or July of 2021. The expectation for completion is July of 2022. Expectations during this time are to remove 18 septic tanks at the RV park, 1 septic tank at the hotel, and a few homes. In addition, those industrial sites on Rain Power Port will be connected to our system. We're looking at 2 lift stations with 2 emergency generators, natural gas, right? And the system is being designed with future expansion in mind. Now, all the sewage will be directed to the kick ladder waste treatment plant. Now, what we want to do, and with the council's blessing, is we'd like to purchase equipment early through the city of Lake City. The reason we want to do this is, there is a saving because of the tax increase. So between Jones Edmond and us, we'd like to work with the contractor to go ahead and purchase things like pumps, motors, elbows, some of these stainless steel electrical panels, piping, ahead of time. Some of these are going to be long lead items, some are not. We'll order the pipe as needed. It's fusible PVC that we're going to be using for the water, and it's going to be carbon steel for the gas, of course. Efforts are going to be made to facilitate the infrastructure in neighboring areas such as crosswalks to allow for services to existing homes and allow for connection for new homes in the future. As Paul and Steve spoke about earlier, there will be a horizontal directional drilling going on. What we're going to end up doing is you're going to have one drilling coming across for gas and sewage, but there'll be a second line going back across for sewage connected to kick line. This time we're using fusible PVC for the sewage, and we're trying to determine the methods of spacing and line sign locations that are being determined. We should have that done very soon.
Yes.
The list, we have the equipment list for what needs to be ordered yet.
I think if I remember right, I think there was an email went out today from Jamie or somebody. I think it went out to you, Brian, asking you what you would need.
That was just asking what vendors we use. I believe Jamie was for us, but she was asking about the vendors and who we buy our material from.
But you have to remember, we like to standardize across the fleet. If we're going to be using a certain type of pump and motor, we want to make sure it's standardized all the way across so that if Brian has a problem, he's not searching to see if he can find a flight motor or this motor or that, or flight club or whatever. He knows what he has.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we get that list, what needs to happen to get those items ordered?
I think we're going to have to work with procurement. We're going to have to make that decision. Remember, there's a couple of things. I mean, whenever you order things early, if you work with the vendor and the contractor agrees to it, and normally they take a receipt of the items, am I correct? Mm-hmm. Normally, if you do it that way, there's not an issue. Occasionally, if you do take receipt of items and the city were to take receipt of them and not the contractor, then you always have to worry about defects and coming back on it.
Yeah, I think some of the concern is waiting too long to get this order started. If we go to the bid, by the time we get the contractor, we need to have the stuff so when the contractor's ready, we're ready to roll.
Right, and that's why we're talking to Jamie today. That's why we're looking at as far as the schedule goes.
Yeah, I thought she was going to have it listed to us by the end of the year.
You're looking at out to bid in February to early March, and she said we're going to try to have this stuff out here the next month or so. that correct, Jamie, as far as the early out?
Yes, sir. Our goal is to get a list by the time we submit the 90% plans and specs to y'all. Just the last thing we need to do is actually reach out to the vendors that the city prefers to work with directly, because there are some items that are fabricated like all together, or with all their pieces they're done together. So certain fittings, certain elbows, parts of the control panel, et cetera. And so we just need to make sure that we know exactly what these vendors include with their items, so that we A, give you the accurate list, and B, we are very clear with our contractor bidding documents what has and has not already been ordered. So that's the last loose end that needs to be tied up. And as Brian was saying, so I got cut off for a second, but I'm pretty sure Brian was saying that I reached out to him today, which I did, so we can set up those meetings.
And you'll have that back by the 4th?
That's our goal, sir. Unfortunately, this is a challenging time of year to get people on the phone and get information, but I think the items that we want to order are straightforward enough that we should have an answer for you by the 4th, which is when we are submitting the 90%. If not, I think we can definitely get it by the end of that week so that procurement can get started.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So the time from the time we get that list to get through procurement, what's that time frame typically?
I couldn't answer that. I mean,
You'd have to talk to procurement because it varies with our procurement department.
Karen's not available. She's on leave right now, but I can get that answer for you.
Mr. Sweat, have you identified, I know you mentioned it earlier, have you identified a CMMS shelf project?
No, sir, I have not. In fact, I'll talk about that towards the end of the meeting.
Okay.
It's important that we discuss that.
Any other questions, Todd?
Yeah, okay, so on the water, going back to that real quick, for the overall water use, we don't have enough water available. I mean, for what we want to do growth wise, that's a fact. Where are we in applying for the water use permit and correcting where they took the 1.6 million gallons previously?
Well, we got that here to talk about.
Okay.
All right, as you know, our water use permit was changed in March 2011, 5.7 down to 4.196 million gallons per day. A permit modification application number 2-92-00037 to reduce our water use permit from 5.78 to 5.0. This request was made under the instruction of the utility director at the time, back in December of 2010. And Mike, tell me if I'm wrong, but this was done to combine all the water use permits for the municipal owned facilities for the city of Lake City. Evidently there were what, 2 or 3?
Yeah, during the time that Price Creek was being built and we were looking at being a regional utility for all Columbia County, the city purchased 4 private systems. There was Brandon Brent, Clayton Smith, Sealy Pine, and Milton Bishop. So the the water treatment plant director at the time looked to combine all of these into one permit. So that's how the process was started.
And what happened there though was, we put in the permit and Swanee River came back and changed it based on the fact that at the time we had about a 38% unaccounted for water loss that was attributed to faulty meters, aging infrastructure. We brought in contractor USA, Utility Service Associates. They were brought in twice to find possible leaks after the Florida Rural Water Association noted several large leaks in the system. They also, when they made the decision, they projected a 1.25% commercial growth for the city of Lake City in our general area, at 1.7 for residential, and a 2% irrigation demand growth, with our population only being 29,500. So when you do that, I mean, some of these calculations are off based on what we know our growth is greater than 1.25. We know that. What it is, I can't tell you. I mean, do we have that number? But, so what we've done is we've reached out to Jones Edmond, and that's part of the alternate water study we're doing. We're also, and part of that, talking about the alternate water study, we just had a water audit done. It was done on December the 8th of 2020 by the Florida Rural Water Association. At this time, based on the information we have given them, we are currently at a 2.2% water loss unaccounted for, which is unbelievable. I mean, this number is lower than in the past because of repairs to existing water distribution system, metering of flushing at fire hydrants, sewer diffusers, and better record keeping. Flushing accounted for about 5%, like I said earlier, and that's about 170,000 gallons per week of auto flushers alone. According to the rural water report, this is legitimate based on the fact that in the base of our system and the way we treat it. You got to think right now, currently we do auto flushing at Pine Mount, Turner, Cole, and what is it, Lake Jeffrey?
Lake
Columbia
Jeffrey,
City.
yeah, Lake Jeffrey and Columbia City.
Lake
We have
Jeffrey.
5 auto flushers in the system right now.
And every one of those that we take and we auto flush is because that is not a loop system. It's deadheaded out there. In order for us to make sure that we keep the total chlorine residual where it's supposed to be, we have to flush those systems. That is water loss. That is money that we're wasting. If you think about it, every time you treat this water, what does it cost to make a gallon of water, Mike, and treat it?
I'm not sure the exact number.
But there is a cost associated with it.
Yeah, when you got the chemicals, the creation, you got the oxygen, you got the creation of the ozone with the electric, it adds up.
When you think about it, we're dumping 170,000 gallons on the ground every week. This is water we have treated.
And that's just the auto flushers. That's not accounting our flushing program.
Which we do manually when you go out there and they test for total chlorine residual. And if it comes back, they have to flush the line until it comes within specs. So what I'm saying to you is 5% of the water that we treat, that we pay to treat, is going on the ground.
Okay, so that 2.2% is not including the flushed water.
No, sir. The 2.2% is unaccounted for.
Unaccounted for, right.
Such as leaks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
That's a big improvement.
Yes, sir. And they've done a great job with it.
And so with that improvement, I think we can modify that water use permit to get our water use back
Yeah,
up.
I think so too. And I think that, when you consider that, there's a number of things that go into this. They've recommended, if the Florida Rural Water Association has recommended that we work with the Swanee River to assist us with flushing notifications, public education, and replacement or modifications in our system. And we have a meeting on January 8th. I think they're coming in on January 8th.
Florida Water's coming in, yes.
So we're going to meet with them to go back over some of these numbers. Now, that alternative water supply or feasibility study that we keep talking about. Let's go over some of the goals of this committee, this group. We want to quantify the city's impact on the lower Santa Fe and the Itchituttony River. Quantify current return flow benefit to minimum flow levels, and identify projects and location for additional offsets to impact. So there's 5 tasks associated in order for us to meet these goals, and they are meeting project management, water balance, water bands, existing return flow simulations, and an alternative water supply, project selection and simulation. We started meetings back in November, back on the 18th, and we're currently having meetings. I think we have another one in 2 weeks. Is that correct?
January 16th, I believe.
16th?
I think so. Or might be the 13th.
We're continuing down this. I think we're looking at 190 days for the entire study to be done. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yes, sir.
So we're trying to find offsets before we go to Swanee River and apply for a change in our water use permit. We need to identify the offsets. We need to make sure that our audit's correct. Is there anything else I'm missing?
Well, this that we're doing right now with Jones Edmonds is in cooperation with Swanee River. It was put before the council a while back, but we're sharing the cost. It was actually Swanee River Water Management District came up with this idea help funded it so that we can find offsets to help us increase. But we have to find these offsets, identify them, and have everything together before we put our permit in for an increase.
Does the water management district, are they already aware that we've gone from a water loss of 38% to a water loss of 2.2%? Have we
Yes,
made
sir.
them aware of that yet?
Yes, sir.
We have made them aware of that?
Florida Water made them aware of it at our last meeting.
Now, there are some questions, I will not tell you any differently. There are some questions about the way we calculated it, that came with the 2.2%. That's the reason we're meeting on the 8th, but you've already broken it down for them to answer the questions they have.
Well, Florida Water did it on total. I've broken it down further so that Swanee River has a better account of where the water's gone, how much water was sold residentially in the city, commercially in the city, residentially in the county, commercially in the county, irrigation meters, all that's, it's being broke down that far this time. Last time we gave them the totals of commercial, the totals of residential, and the totals of irrigation. And that's what Florida Water used. Swanee River wanted it broke down further, so that's what we're in the process of doing right now. Numbers are still the same. It's just they're being divided out in four categories.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
So in the permit, the water use permit that Mr. Sweat identified, we talked about basically no projected growth to the system, but we know that's not accurate. We know we have projected growth, and we're hoping to have a lot of projected growth if everything works out economically the way that we want it to work out. So my question is, are they aware of that as well? That, hey, we went from no projected growth to now we're projecting growth, and is that number solid, or are we ballparking that?
In the assessment, they've asked for the projected growth from the county. The only thing we've gotten from the county was their projected growth for the mega industrial park. But like we've said in the past, that changes daily. So we can only go by the numbers we have. Without knowing the actual numbers, we can only give Joan Edmond and Swanee River the numbers that we have at this time.
Tell me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think the numbers at 1.25 and at 1.7 was given by University of Florida.
As far as the projected growth,
yeah.
Yes, that was Swanee River did it according to University of Florida's charts.
So, Mr. Sweat, are we prepared, or have we already asked the county for the projected growth number, or what's the plan to make that happen?
Well, we asked for numbers. I think David and I talked about that a few weeks ago. Am I correct, David? Yes. So we are working on it. We're trying to, we made it so that we're comparing apples to apples. It may be benefit us to go back to the University of Florida and find out what their projections are. So when they're comparing what we applied for in 2011, what they permitted as to, and they can see the difference in what we have now, it may benefit us to show that.
So our plan currently is that we're working with Mr. Kraus to determine what the growth rate is, and we're reaching out to the University of Florida because they did the original number.
We haven't, but we should.
Well, we should. That is currently the plan to move forward. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a point of clarification, the University of Florida numbers that are being referred to are from, it's called BEBR, the Bureau of Economic and Business Research, and they come up with population growth projections, low, medium, and high projections for every county and city in the state of Florida. And so typically those are the numbers that are used to project population growth in an area. And typically a medium growth curve is used. And for example, Lake Cities is a little bit higher than Columbia County as a whole, but the district will review the BEBR numbers from the last 20 years to try to come up with a reasonable assessment of where your population could go in the future. However, that's only one part of the water use permit analysis. They also will look at known subdivisions, for example, that are coming into the city, known hotels for the commercial development side, known industrial developments, things like that. So the UF Beaver numbers are definitely one important part and the main part of the population projections, but there are ways that we can make an argument for higher rates of growth that we know are coming.
So, Ms. Bell, if we have a development area such as the industrial park on the east side of town that we're projecting to bring some industry into, but we don't know the end user yet, are we able to communicate that to the water management district that we're anticipating that growth at that area? Because, for example, we've put in the rail spur. The counties receive millions of dollars in grants to develop that. So although we don't know the end user, the expectation is that it's going to be there. Are we able to quantify that in a reliable way for the water management district?
Yes, sir, I believe so. What the county and their and Weyerhaeuser, the landowner, have been able to provide to us is a list of prospective businesses that have reached out for copies of plans and for more information. And my recommendation would be to provide that information to the water management district as an example of the types of businesses that may be coming. And I think that you could develop some sort of averaging equation based on prospective businesses, the amount of property they were looking to take versus the entire size of the industrial park, and make an educated guess as to what the demand could be, because they also are cognizant of the fact that we're not looking at the demand tomorrow, but in the next 20 years. And so they do allow for a certain amount of guesswork, but I think we have enough information at this point to where we could give them something, from an on the ground infrastructure growth perspective. It's a little more challenging to know exactly what's coming, how much, and when. But from the water use permitting side, I think what we have should be sufficient.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Sweat, we covered a lot. I think to bring everybody back, I think we're on item number 5, discussion of possible action with the utilities concerning the North Florida Mega Industrial Park. Is there something that you're looking for this committee to recommend to the city council for action?
I think based on the information we've given today, I think the city council needs to determine whether or not our time, efforts, and resources are better spent on a shovel-ready project such as Bell Road versus the North Florida Mega Industrial Park. You're talking about being ready to service an industry, an industrial customer in a very short time versus we're still unsure of what we need to do out there at the North Florida Mega Park. We know that they're going to need what they need. They need water, they need sewage, they need gas. But can we supply it over the length of the lifetime of that area? I don't think we can. We can't identify what we need to supply to it. So if I were to make a recommendation, and I think Paul, you probably agree with me on this, is Bell Road and State Road 47 would be our focus.
All right. One of the things that we've not talked about, and I just want to make sure that we kind of discuss it. I haven't heard anybody bring it up. What role does the county play concerning the master planning of utilities? And then what would the county city cost share look like? So right now the discussion that we're having, we're talking about the city incurring the cost of any expansions and whatnot. And so have we had those discussions with the county as to what role are each of us playing? What's the cost share looking like? Those types of things. Are you working with the county on that, or is Mr. Helfenberger working?
I think Mr. Helfenberger has been working with David on that. I don't know how far along they are. I do know that we are hopefully going to begin the joint city-county meetings in the near future. So that may be something that would be discussed there.
So when it comes to item number 5 for possible action, there's Does anyone want to make sure before we move on to the next item? There's no motions to recommend any action to the city council currently that are actionable. Mr. Mayor?
What it sounds like to me is we got shovel-ready places that we're ready to go with that. But I think we still need to work with the paper park and be ready to do, but we just can't guess at what we're doing.
Right.
So I don't know if there's any action. I give up, Mr. Fred saying is that we need to work on these sites that are closer to where we are at. And that's fine, but we need to also listen to what's coming out there because there has been a lot put into it.
That seems to be what I've heard as well. I just want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity here to make sure that we've covered the item. Yes.
I have a clarification question. So what you were saying is we're not able to provide, you didn't say we're not able to provide what they need at the North Florida Intermodal Park.
20 years down the road, right now, we're currently not able to supply them with what they need 20 years down the road. We can supply them, but I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. We can supply them with gas, sewage, and water at this time, today. But can we supply them where for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 to some of these industries? Absolutely not. You know, not without the sewage plant being built by the county and prepared to go.
Well, that's got a definite time frame on it.
Right. And as far as water, I mean, we can supply it, but will it be ready tomorrow? No, we can't. We can only supply a certain amount based on flow and based on our water use, on our permit. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. So we're saying because we didn't plan ahead to get that permit previously, because we didn't know the flows that they need, because they haven't provided them to us, that we won't be ready. But what we're not saying, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we have the ability to provide it if we know what's needed. I just want to clarify because that's not what I've heard.
I think as soon as possible after the first year, I'd like to see us do the joint city-county utility meeting. And now that we've kind of got an update on our local capabilities, get with them and do what you're talking about on the master planning for the whole county and what we need to do.
And then, Mr. Switter, are you advocating for the master planning over the water feasibility study? So the master planning for all utilities, comprehensive over just the water feasibility study for the industrial park? Is that the position that you're advocating?
I don't think that you can do one without the other. If we do the master plan, we're still going to have a feasibility study done as part of the master plan. That information is going to be required.
But it will be one small part of the bigger plan. So when we talk about budgeting and coming up with the priorities for the city council to recommend to the city council, you're recommending the overall master planning versus water feasibility study and then come back to master plan.
That is correct.
I agree with that.
Any other committee members have anything, any comments, questions, concerns? All right, so that was a long discussion on item number 5. We'll move to item number 6, discussion and possible action concerning mapping and master planning. Mr. Sweat, and I know we had some bleed over. So Mr. Sweat, is there something specific to mapping and master planning?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, we talked about almost every bit of it. Distribution and collections, working with GIS daily, so is the gas department. I mean, I do want to give you a couple examples of, of what these guys are up against. Just in the past 3 weeks, they have identified numerous errors on the south end of the county along Bascom North, Michigan Street, and along State Road 47. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about, these are roads that are not even, 10 years old, 15 years old, the expansion. They're going out there and finding manholes that have been covered up or manholes that aren't listed on drawings.
We didn't have no regulations on no maps we even owned. They were about 8 to 10 foot deep.
Yeah. Now this is what these guys are up against. This is because of poor project management when that job was done. Nobody went back and made sure that the finalized red line drawings were correct before they were turned over to the city. So you can see the difficulty that Paul and his group have when they're trying to update drawings and they have a failure on a project manager to ensure that these things are done correctly. So it's an ongoing process. Anybody who thinks that this is going to be done overnight, they're just wrong. We can't get these things done. It take everybody in distribution and collection, send them out with a locator and still come back and not be at 100%. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. What we have to do, we got tearing some roads, we have to call locates in. So it's not a quick process. We took us 3 weeks to locate. Then they're actually small sections, but it's a time consuming ordeal.
Super. So just kind of to summarize, because I'm hearing a lot of challenges concerning some of the expectations that we're having with the county, and I want to make sure that we're crystal clear here. So we have the ability to work with the county when we know the specifics of the ask, the end user, for example, or the end user requirements, not the end user, but the end user requirements. Correct. So it seems to me, whether we're talking about 47 Bell Road, west of town, east of town, what the city needs is information regarding end user requirements for water, wastewater, and gas to be able to make intelligent decisions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so to me, that seems to be just not to opine, but it seems to me that that's a function of the city administration and the county administration working together, correct?
That is correct.
With the vision being laid out between the elected officials of the city and the county, correct?
That is correct.
And so what the elected officials owe you is the vision, and your job is to implement the vision administratively with the county when we have these joint projects. So just, all right. Anything else when it comes to item number 6, and we talk mapping and master planning? Any other committee members? Last chance. We'll move to item number 7, and that is discussion of possible action, persons with expertise in utilities, Mr. Sweat.
I know you brought up earlier about the St. Margaret Street wastewater treatment plant. I want to give you a schedule on that. The submittal process will be done by mid-January 2021. This is only aeration equipment. Partial mobilization will be February, March of 2021. We're going to be doing an in-service grid removal, and they'll be doing some installation of the VFDs, the variable frequency drives for some of the motors over there. We're looking at project mobilization, July 2021, with delivery equipment, probably mid-August of 2021, with an approximate completion date of 2021 October. Now that is as far as the aeration part of the project. You know, there's a number of identified issues at that plant, and one of them is the clarifier. I think it's clarifier 3, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. We've been discussing with SGS and TSC Jacobs trying to overcome a bond issue. I think we've gotten through that though. SGS is going to carry the bond on that.
Yes.
So as far as, we are making progress, and these are all considered partial outages. We're only taking one train down at a time. We're determining where we need, what we need to do first, and we're approaching those things. So you may be looking at this, being a 3 or 4 year project before we take and get everything that was listed on that assessment done.
At least 3 years, yes.
At least 3 years. The next thing we probably want to talk about is the public access reuse of the power system. I was very fortunate last week. I was able to walk it down with Cody Pridgeon and Bill Fish. Walking it down though, the one thing I've come to realize is that there is going to have to be extensive work done on that system, just on the equipment, especially on the filtration house, to bring it up to speed. Paul, 2 weeks ago, applied for the grant, resubmitted the grant with Swanee River.
Yes.
Under the Springs grant, right?
Springs and House appropriation.
So the good thing about it is if we are able to do this new design will allow for total flooring residual. Will meet requirements of the end users. It's estimated this work's going to cost about $1 million. I think Jamie, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's, what is the city's contribution?
It's just shy of 87,000, sir.
87,000. And this will incorporate SCADA improvements and relocation and construction of the chlorine contact chamber. Currently, that chamber is actually part of the tank itself. The design given a few years back by Jones Edmond will actually move it over to the filtration housing. That will allow for us, when we get our TCR, our total chlorine residual reading before it's sent to the tank, to be par, public access reuse. Currently, we only have one user identified, and that's Tice Farm. They're going to take about 500,000 gallons once we're done. But we do need to begin to identify other end users if we're going to continue down this road. One of the things I think we need to talk about is we have a combined wastewater treatment effluent of about 2 million gallons. The wetlands require about 1.6, and that part tank has 1.5 million gallons in it. And I believe, if I'm correct, Tice is going to take 500,000 a day. So we're going to be cutting it short to maintain the wetlands out there and run the PAR system. And the terrible thing about it is when Tice needs the water is about the same time we're in a dry season, and the wetlands need that water to survive as well. Sound right?
Yes, sir.
So that, and we need to, once we get done with this project, we need to determine what the cost is for a gallon of PAR water. Reuse water. What's it cost to take and create and sell? So those are things we have to do there. Real quick, I want to bring you up to speed on the risk and resilience assessment and the emergency response plan for our water department. The America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018 requires that all community water systems serving population greater than 3,300 assess the risk to and resilience of our systems. The purpose of this assessment is to assess the risk to and the resilience of the city of Lake City water system. The American Water Works Association standard is used as the guideline for this assessment. The results and recommendations of this assessment are confidential, as would be expected. But we do have a quote currently with Jones Edmond, I believe it is.
Yes, sir.
To create an emergency response plan. There is a very tight timeline on this. We have to have our assessment certified and sent to the EPA by June 30th of 2021. And by December 30th of 2021, we have to have our ERP plan sent to.
It has to be certified too.
It has to be certified as well. So, and this is going to be something that has to be done at least every 5 years. So these are costs that we're going to incur on a regular basis. So, real quick here, I just want to finish up. One of the things that we are pushing with our utility group is safety. As of today, we have 158 safe work days. When you take into consideration that there are how many employees with our water department, with utilities, public works?
Well, utilities has about 87.
87, I think you can throw 30 in there with public works, the airport, and IT. 158 safe work days with no reportable accident is pretty impressive. One of the things that we are looking at versus the CMMS, Mr. Green, we are looking at lockout tagout. Lockout tagout right now is currently being done by hand at the plants, and there's very little of it done out in the field. We're basically doing it through tribal knowledge. People are locking things out because they know what to do. We're lucky that we have trained employees. They understand. But we need to, before we move forward with our computer maintenance management system, we need to identify our lockout tagout platform and system and go down that road to ensure the safety of our employees. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to reinstitute the safety committee. We are working on standard operating procedure creations, and we are contemplating the use of what we call a no compromise safety policy, where each employee is empowered and understands they will not compromise safety for the sake of production. So we want to make sure that we're pressing this down, making our people understand that their safety comes before everything else. We're also working twofold on the training. We need to formalize our training, make sure that our people are trained. And there's a couple other things. There'll be tree planting going on. I think that it goes through on, the resolution goes through on January 4th for the tree planting at the spray field. There was a grant put in recently for the recharge well at the wetlands in the spray field. If this were to be done, it would allow us to gravity drain to the wetlands instead of the transfer pumps. Therefore, that's a savings as far as the electricity we have to use to take and operate those pumps. And then the addition of a fifth well over at Price Creek. We're waiting on Florida Rural Water Association.
Rural Water should have the permit application and the engineering for the basic well design this month.
So that's it.
So on the utility emergency response plan, that item will be on our next agenda.
Yes, sir. On the next agenda for the
next
utility.
agenda for this meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And talking about the next meeting date, well, before I do, I just want to, Mr. Sampson, I want to give you an opportunity. Do you have any questions, any more comments before we?
I do.
Yes.
Of course. The public access reuse. Some of it, we're talking about the cost per gallon of that, but doesn't that offset our use to allow us to have a higher availability as well?
There is, the public access reuse will allow us, because that's an offset for what we're taking out. So that is an offset. There is a trade there, but there still is a cost incurred by the city to create, to treat this water for public access.
So when we figure that cost, do we offset it by saying if I do 500,000 gallons to this guy and I can sell another 500,000, there's revenue here, cost here, but put like things together for accounting purposes to say this is really the real cost.
I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah, because I worry about us getting into this is the cost, but if this is the cost and we need that 500,000 gallons to bring in a tax base, we need to make sure we're expanding that reuse. Because that's one thing Swan River Water Main was huge on, is this reuse.
Right.
And the way the Price Creek plant was built, we were to be doing reuse, and we haven't been really doing that yet. So I know that's a big concern. And I know some of it is, we heard in that in the meeting where it was presented, we have one employee, and we need 3 employees to get it out there. But is another issue that we don't have enough wastewater coming into that plant?
Well, that would be part of it, is that right now we're only at 2 million gallons of effluent, and you're putting 1.6 to the wetlands to maintain them. And you're going to require 500,000 gallons every day going over there to the tank. The numbers, you're close. You're at 2.12. It's very close. Now, the thing and I want to go back to something you said about this improvement, this grant that we've applied for the PAR system. By doing that, we will not have to station someone there like we talked about before. That's part of the reason we're doing it, is so that you don't have to have someone stationed there to do research the entire time. The other part of it is you're not wasting as much water going back because, your TCR isn't high enough. But you also take into consideration that by pulling it in SCADA, we would be able to look at this from a, from what, your laptop or even your phone. Yeah. So this is going to allow us, to look at this thing a lot better, to see what's going on and control it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Mr. Mayor.
Nothing right now.
Any of the other committee members? Mr. Osborne, yes.
Yeah, if I may say, we are members of Florida Rural Water Association. And when it comes time for the reuse to figure for small fee through Florida Water, they will do a water rates analysis for us to help us come up with the proper rate for the reuse water. So.
Yes, sir, Mr. Zuber.
Yeah, I've been really impressed tonight, just how much goes into everything. I think most citizens in this county and city don't appreciate all the underworkings, the length of time and planning. I'm working with Scott Stewart these years of working on a development from bare ground and having conversations with Paul Dial and Tim Murphy. There's a lot of linking that goes on. I guess I'm really impressed tonight. People don't know the effort it takes when all you could be at home having dinner and stuff and all the planning and I guess it's just a big heartfelt thanks as a citizen of this community of what growth looks like and the effort that goes into working together and how it betters our community, and a lot of that goes unsung. So a big thanks to all of you for that.
Thank you for those words. Any other committee members? Last opportunity to speak. Anybody online? Mandy?
No.
No? All right. So one of the things that we want to talk about is our next meeting. I have probably January 14th down to do the next meeting. We know that we want to talk about utility emergency response plan update. And I suspect I would encourage everyone to reach out to me and we'll try to get our items on the agenda that need to be on the agenda for the next meeting. In addition to that particular item, and we'll follow up on what we talked about tonight. In the interim as well, I believe the county commission has a meeting before that date. And so hopefully we'll have a better direction if they want to be on board with the joint committee. I hope that they do. I hope they find it beneficial and to their time and their efforts. It takes all of us to make it all work. So with that, is January 14th a good date for the other?
You're right. I think it is.
Yes.
I think it's fine.
Yes, Ms. Sykes.
You know what I'm about to say. Agenda items will have to be to me by the 6th because they'll have to go out on the 7th. So that gives them not a long time. So I don't know what the city manager's deadline would be if he wants to review the items first, but my deadline would be the 6th.
So everybody's aware, if you have an item that you want on the agenda, city clerk says the 6th. So the 6th will be the deadline to get your item on the agenda. All right, is there a motion for adjournment?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.